Well, Dune Part 2 explores a rich world in a polished and amazing looking movie that took me 90 minutes to figure out why I wasn't enjoying it. I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. The IMDb synopsis for Dune Part 2 reads, Paul Atreides unites with Chani and the Fremen while seeking revenge against the conspirators who destroyed his family. I wish that's what the movie felt like it was about, a revenge tale. And I don't think that's what this movie is. It's very much like Dune Part 1, a sweeping, grand science fiction drama with bursts of action here and there and some good action at that. I think it's really focused on presenting multiple intriguing facets of this richly developed fictional world. And that's the emotion I most commonly felt: intrigue or curiosity or interest, but not suspense, not concern, not hope, not sadness. 90 minutes in, I realized this is largely, I would describe it as a palace court intrigue drama with some war stuff too. I mean, you don't always get that in palace court intrigue and stuff, but my wife likes to watch shows like The Crown and other stuff that has to do with medieval kingdoms and just the manipulating and the grasping for power and all that kind of stuff. And it really reminds me of that kind of story, which is just not my thing. I can see why many people would love this movie and it would really be for them, and it's really made well for that audience, but I'm not that audience. But yeah, I would describe it as palace court intrigue drama with this insanely generous science fiction setting. Despite, though, the richness of the setting and the lore, which made me want to explore this world, walk around in this world, I wanted to do that through a different story, or maybe like through a video game if they use the same visual design of the world in a video game. I connect to stories that I'm, passively taking in, like movies and TV and stuff like that, in proportion to the focus on characters and their motives being frequently represented and relatable to me in some way. Many motives here were about pursuing political or economic power, or preserving culture that you feel really connected to as one who's part of that culture. There was a very, I think, sparsely and superficially presented romance that because of how sparse and superficial it felt to me, I didn't connect with. Revenge is an element of the story. It's supposed to be, I think, Paul Atreides, the main character's motive. And revenge is something we can all relate to, maybe not because somebody killed our loved one, but just, the desire we have to get back at somebody because we feel like they mistreated us or mistreated someone else. So that instinct, that reflex, we all feel, we all know, and so I think we can connect to that. But revenge as Paul's motive was only significantly touched on, I thought, in one or two scenes of this 2-hour and 45-minute experience. All they would have to do for me, I think, is now and then give like a silent close-up of Paul that's brooding for a moment right before some conversation starts. Someone walks up to him and starts talking. Right before that, just show him looking off, into the distance with kind of a sad or a furrowed brow or something, and then cut really briefly to a quick cut of his father dying, or sweet childhood memories of his father. Just remind me, this is what it's about for Paul Atreides. And then get back to the action. Just do that every now and then. It would just take a few seconds here and there, peppered out throughout. And if you wanted to make up the time, you could shave a few seconds here and there off of establishing shots or, landscape and vista shots, which this movie likes. Not to, an overindulgent effect, but I think you could trim some of those, a few seconds here and there, and be just fine. And the trade-off, for me, would be well worth it. But they didn't do that. And so I was kept at arm's length from any emotional investment. And I even got bored by the halfway point as a result. Interesting, intriguing, thought-provoking, these things as core defining elements of an experience only keep me engaged for so long in fiction. Now, I like those things. I like intriguing, interesting, and thought-provoking things, but I prefer to go to nonfiction to scratch those itches. In fiction, I want to feel. That's what's going to really keep me engaged. As far as the performances go, really solid, as it was in the first movie. A collection of very capable actors that I wish were given different material. So I don't really have much more to say on that. As far as, though, the stunts, the visuals, wow. I mean, I want to visit this world, this realm. It feels like a fully realized realm. It does have a grounded and narrow color palette, but the world, despite that, felt intricate and deeply thought out in great detail. And so, since they were giving so much detail and so much thought to so many different things, the narrow color palette for me just made it feel more real, more like a place I could actually go than if it would have been, overly colorized. I mean, if you open up a Dune world next to the Universal Studios in California, I'll buy a ticket. I'm definitely going to want to go there. And minimal or effective use of CG and green screen made it feel like it did exist. I mean, just the visual polish and presentation of this movie, fantastic. I was puzzled by a few brief scenes, or actually one kind of extended scene where they used black and white quite a bit, but still with small bits of color. I was like, are we under some kind of like a black and white space ray right now? Is that in this part of the world? Is there a black and white ray that's making everything black and white except for just a few colors here and there? I was trying to figure out, what is this about? You compare that to, say, like, I think it was Schindler's List, that very selectively would have color in it, but that was done for very purposeful, artistic, dramatic effect. And this didn't seem to have a purpose that I could identify, or explanation in lore. So either artistically or in lore, I didn't understand why they were using black and white in these few instances. It was striking and cool. It just would have felt more at home and would have taken me out of the movie, I think, less if the whole movie was more visually stylized that way, or if they had an in-lore explanation. If there was one, I missed it. But other than that, I mean, man, just a really visually engaging and polished movie. I have no complaints there. Okay, as far as themes, is there anything of moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance going on in the themes of this thing that might trigger some worthwhile thought or conversation? I'm not a politically oriented person, and so I don't tend to think in those terms when I'm looking at fiction. There's probably some political themes here. In fact, there's a reluctant Messiah thing going on with Paul Atreides, but this movie seems, and I can't speak for the books at all. So I'm just looking at this movie on its own merits. And it seems to me that there would be less of an intent to make a commentary on Messiah figures or Jesus in particular, even though there are some things that would certainly compare Paul Atreides or parallel Jesus in some ways with Paul's experience, his life, his story. But anyway, it seems like maybe there's more about leaders who come to power reluctantly and then their supporters end up getting more than they bargained for, something along those lines. I'm not sure. But I do think there's a springboard to thinking about Jesus, talking about Jesus, if we choose to take it. Specifically, what did Jesus think of himself? We see that Paul doesn't think of himself as this Messiah figure, doesn't like being thought of that way. Now, some have tried to suggest over the years that Jesus would never have thought of himself as that special, and certainly not as equal with God. But I think that would be false humility on Jesus' part to say that, oh, I'm not that special. I think humility is having a not an elevated understanding of who you are, but rather an accurate understanding of who you are. And so to say that you are less than what you are, that's false humility. And the behavior and the words of Jesus definitely suggest that he did see something very significant about himself, radically significant about himself. In fact, equal with God, if we're paying attention and gain some basic understanding of the terms that he was using, then it's like, wow, no, you can't really say that he was this reluctant, falsely humbled Messiah figure. He was very aware of who he was and the role that he was taking on. Even so, we can, I think, as we're kind of thinking about those types of things about Jesus, fail to appreciate his full humanity, maybe out of a desire to defend his full divinity. But we can, do that to the extent that we're not really recognizing and meditating on the legitimate humanity of Jesus. A number of years ago, I heard the suggestion that Jesus would have learned of his identity as God's unique son, not from like some kind of direct knowledge download from God, but by putting together the pieces from scripture, from prophecy, in relation to the circumstances of his lineage and the circumstances of his birth. That he would have had such a dedication and a high view of scripture, that he would have known scripture, been familiar with it enough to look at what it says about the Messiah and realize, whoa, I have. I mean, I don't think he said whoa, but or really, what was his emotional state as he was realizing that? That's something I find really interesting to speculate on. What must the weight of that moment have been like for him to realize who he was, what he was meant to do? Or how many progressive moments did he have of light bulbs going on and the feeling of increasing weight settling on his shoulders as he maybe more and more understood? I think of all this kind of like self-understanding almost certainly happened before he even began his ministry at all. This would have been during his adolescent years, his teenage years, maybe. I don't know when these light bulbs went on, but I think at some point it's very reasonable. I find this view of Jesus discovering who he is through a dedication to Scripture, I find it very reasonable and very interesting. A great topic for us to think about and to talk about. All right, now I have no idea what your tastes are in movies, but if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, Vader, skip this one. Not forever. It's an incredible looking world. It's richly realized world by a very strong production and presentation. But wait for both parts or even the whole series yet to be completed to all be on one streaming service that you already have for a month for some other reason. And then during that month, watch it 45 to 60 minutes at a time, once a day or something. I mean, it's interesting, sometimes even fascinating for that long, 45 to 60 minutes. But by 90 minutes, you're going to be checking your watch regularly out of a lack of any emotional investment in the characters or the story. This one's rated PG-13 for sequences of strong violence, some suggestive material, and brief, strong language. Those are all of my thoughts for now on Dune Part 2. Right now, I'd like to take some time to write a tune for pre-made rhyme. The lyrics kind of never change, but the melody gets rearranged. I never know what I'll create to say how much I appreciate Dan Axel, Gabriel Stinson, Olin D. Branham, Winston Crutchfield, Lee Bray, Justin D. Myers, Joel Nelson and Scruffosaurus. Thank you for supporting me and SPP and CGC. And now to all who hear this tune, thank you as well. Please come back soon. Wanna hear your name in song? Then check out our page on Patreon. If that didn't totally turn you off from doing so. Would love to get your thoughts, as always, and reactions in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, click that bell to stay connected. I do want to thank the Spirit Blade Insiders, all of them, for making this review possible. You can get info about the benefits of joining at patreon.com/SpiritBlade Productions. Then, I hope you'll check out our podcast and stay connected to all CGC content at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.